Hello guys, how are you guys doing? Welcome to the path. Welcome to the first. This should be the first video. This is the first video of the path, a new channel that I've created, and so I'm just thankful, so thankful to all of you guys for showing up, and I really appreciate your presence as we get into the word, as we get into like the different topics that we'll be discussing. I can't wait. I'm very excited. Yeah, man. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. So, what is the path? I think you should start with what the path is, just like as a kind of general introduction. The path for me is a way for me to delve into the lives of biblical characters and to explore their lives, and to understand their paths that they've taken, how God has shaped their lives to not just looking at Paul at his most when he's an apostle, when he's a pastor, when he's like a teacher and all of that, but also going back into like the his past and exploring how, because that's for me sometimes is the most relatable part for me. It's not just like the final version, but it's the building blocks. Like he came from here, he was a sinner, and then he worked. He his life in faith, his life in what with people and everything like that. For me, that's very inspirational for me, and it's very encouraging a lot of times because when I do fall, that's kind of like a lot of what I fall back on is when I is going back to is looking at the Bible and seeing that this is a part of the journey. This is a part of my story. It's a part of the story that God is writing, that even though I've fallen today, I can get better tomorrow, and he has such a good promise for me, and so for so many people as well. So yeah, that is what the path is about. We're going to be looking at different, not just looking at like biblical characters, but also like things like church structures, people in church scenarios, life, what it means to live a gospel-driven life, gospel-led life. I think that's how Tim Keller said it. Gospel-led life, life that is like literally every part of me is every part of me, and also pray for the person that side is like is just shaped by the gospel that we read every day. So yeah, that's the introduction to the path. Next, what the first video is called, the video that we're shooting now is called Young Bloods. And young bloods for me is a way to it means someone who's young in an organization, someone who's young in a particular field, or someone who's just generally young, basically when growing up. But so young bloods are people, usually young people, people who are unexperienced, people who are still like finding their feet and whatnot. And for me, Young Bloods is going to be a series that is based on different young characters in the Bible. People. So with this series, we're going to look at today. We're looking at Timothy. Tomorrow we can look at Mary. The other day we can look at who else? Elisha. Who else I have? Like a bunch of people. Just Jeremiah. Just looking at different young people in the Bible, and how just looking at their growth, their process. Especially that's my favorite part. Is what is their process? How do they grow? How do they improve their lives? I love process. I love that's my ish. I don't even lie. So yeah, that's what we're going to be getting into today. I have a couple of notes in here. So I have a couple of notes that we'll be going through and stuff like that. And yeah, yes. So for when I was exploring the life of Timothy, I used First Timothy, the book. That's like the first part, because I think this video is going to be like two parts. So with this part, I focus on First Timothy and a lot of like different verses that I found like before, or that I searched and found about his life before, from like when he met Paul and stuff like that, when he was referenced in like early like parts of the New Testament. So, who is Timothy? Timothy is a young man, obviously being a young blood, but he was someone who was a disciple at a young age. So from what I read, he was someone who was like he was not he was maybe in his late teens, early 20s when he met Paul and consequently joined his party and his journey and ministry and everything like that. And when he was basically like brought into that family, and so that's specifically why I brought him in, because for me as well, Timothy is one of my favorite characters in the Bible, because not only because he's young, but also because of how relatable he is in terms of his personality. I relate a lot to his personality and how authentic he is to his feelings, and especially not being like, especially as a guy as well, it's very easy to connect to Timothy in terms of like, certain levels on being able to not being as confident, dealing with confidence issues, dealing with fear and things like that, it's very, very easy to connect to him. I think that's a general thing that we can all connect to. But yeah, Timothy was he was what between early what late teens, early 20s. And the first thing that I wanted to like to that drew me, or that I understood when I was reading his story, was that he was a disciple. First, he was already a disciple. In Acts, it speaks about how he was already a disciple before Paul had met him. And one thing that they also bring up is about how everyone who had met him had spoke good of him, had spoke well of him. And that for me is point out to the fact that he was a man of character. Even at his young age, he was a man of character. He was a man of integrity, and people recognized that because of his service and also how what he stood for. And for someone like, even though I'm still young, it can be very easy to fall into the trap of like maturity happens when you're old, or maturity is something for people who are like 30s, 40s, or whatever. But even in his young age, he was respected by a large group of people, and Paul even saw that and recognized that in him, to seek him and to ask him to join his group in going to ministry. And I think that that is a very good point. That is a very it's a very encouraging and also motivating point, in that I have all the tools I need now as a young person to be the man that I want to be. I don't have to wait. I don't have to wait until age or anything like that dictates that. I can be that man of integrity now. However, the second thing that I also noticed when I was reading about Timothy and him as a young man is that his need, or can I say requirement? I don't know if it's a requirement or if it's a need. I would say it is a requirement. I'm going to, yeah, let's go on that. Let's stand on that. It's a requirement for mentorship. One of the things that Paul did was that by calling him into, especially Paul, like he took such a liking to Timothy in a way that was so deep and genuine, and just such a powerful relationship. A lot of times, like even when you're reading the word, like you can see he always refers to him as my son in faith, or my child in faith, or there's always that like connotation of this is my child, this is someone who I'm deeply connected to, and I view not more than just like a co-worker or anything like that. And even in like some of the writings, you'll see like from Paul and Timothy, because Timothy was writing for Paul. So I what that like spoke to me about is that the requirement of mentorship is that as a young person, you will not grow to where you will be without mentorship. You need that in your life. You need mentorship. You need someone who will be able to guide you, someone who's older than you, someone who has lived life, who has had a lot of life experiences that you don't have at this moment, to guide you along your journey. And there's a part, and one thing about mentorship, I'm just going to go to the notes, but one thing about mentorship, and the type of mentorship, I think that mentorship is a very broad term, but the type of mentorship that Timothy and Paul shared was very interesting, because in First Timothy 1 verse 12 to 15, um, Paul speaks about the fact that I am I was formerly Paul is writing to Timothy, and he says, I was formerly a murderer. I was formerly what he was formerly someone who was blaspheming against God, who was breaking down the church, and even makes that's where the famous line about I am the chief sinner. I am the chief. Out of all sinners, I am the chief. I have the most. I have committed the most sin. And that type of vulnerability, but also that type of honesty about in Paul writing to Timothy, explains the type of mentor relationship that you need. You can't just have a mentor that is like that is not able to reflect on their own past mistakes, or is can give you their own honestly is who are open with their own challenges that they faced. And I think that with this type of relationship, for me, what stood out was just like the honesty, and the fact that Paul was so was so forthcoming to share with Timothy that he is not perfect. And That just like describes the type of the type of mental relationship that we're looking for here. And the other thing I also wanted to bring up was the fact, and this is related to a conversation that I had today with my friend. Today, it's 2 a.m. Yesterday, with my friend Kliniso, and he explained that when in his life and in his walk with God, he's such an amazing Christian. He's a very strong Christian, and he shared with me that one of the most important things that has helped him in his growth with God was the fact that he has always been around people or men, men of God who have always taken this mentorship role over him, and he has always been submitted to that. And I think that's another key point, is that Timothy had to submit, and he submitted to Paul. As much as Paul had opened that path, we as a person, as young Christians, we also have a duty to submit to that. When Paul was sending Timothy out, he had to submit to that. He couldn't say no. He had to submit to that because he trusted the mentorship of Paul. And that is another thing where mentorship is a key part of your growth and maturity as a Christian. To achieve that sense of like the growth that we need, and to be able to become the men and women of God that we are called to be, we need to have that mentorship. We need to grow in that submission of an authority figure or person who is high, who has more experience than us. So that was like the first point that I wanted to bring up about mentorship. The next point is about, what is the next point? The next point is about personal growth. The next point is about personal growth, authenticity, and doing it scared. That's what I love about Timothy. So it's a bunch of points, but first one was about personal growth. In First Timothy, there's a the reason why Paul is writing to him is because at this time, what I also researched is that Timothy at this time was 30 years old. So it's obviously been what, let's say 10 years. Let's just say 10 years, like just try it. Let's just say 10 years. It's been 10 years since Timothy had met Paul, and they had basically been on journeys. And in this time, they've been on journeys, they've seen each other, they've read, they've learned from each other, they're growing with each other. And so you'd assume at this time, like Paul and Timothy are at a good place in terms of in their relationship. And so, but one of the biggest things that I also see was that another step that he had to take was that he had to leave. He had to go and what the word that is used is, he had to go and to be in charge of the church in Ephesus. And and for me as a young person, it encourages me that there's going to be a time when you have to leave. And for someone who doesn't, like, personally, I don't like change. Change is very uncomfortable. I hate change. Just be frank. I hate change. I don't like change at all. It just it triggers me. It leads me to terrible places. Breakdowns and all of that. But one of the things which I'm also learning is like from Timothy is that he had to leave Paul. Even though he probably wanted to stay with Paul, he had to leave Paul. He had to go and to stay with this church in Ephesus at the calling of Paul, at the sending of Paul. And he had to go and he had to lead a group of people who he may not have been comfortable with. And one of the most interesting things that I also get from Timothy is that this was probably like one of the most difficult things. And because Timothy is someone who does things even though he's scared. He's someone who does things scared. You don't have to do it confident. You don't have to do it knowing. You don't even know what you have to do, but you have to do it regardless. And Timothy always did things even while he was scared. He was a man of faith. And one key verse that I read was in First Corinthians what? First Corinthians 16 verse 10. In First Corinthians 16 verse 10, Paul writes to the church into the church of Corinth, and he says that he asked them to make sure that Timothy has nothing to fear. He asked them to make sure that Timothy has nothing to fear. And that was a very key, that was a very important, it was a very interesting verse because it shows that Timothy had let Paul know that, or maybe even Paul has known Timothy enough to know that this is a situation which scares him, and even though he's going to do it regardless, it's still going to scare him. And so the fact that Paul writes to the church in Corinthians that they should do it, that they should make sure that Timothy has nothing to be scared of and create like that positive environment, shows that we also have a calling in ourselves that as young people we are going to have to do a lot of things scared. We're going to be called to positions, we're going to be called to experiences, callings, different situations that we might not feel that we have the capacity to do it, but we have to do it scared. And that I love that Timothy has provided this beautiful picture of what this looks like. He went to the church of Corinth. He went to the church of Ephesus. He went to the church of Ephesus. Did it all. Even though he was scared, he did it because of being that man of faith. Right. So that is the second point. That is what I think that's the third point. It's the third point. I have no idea. It's at some point. It's some point. Um, and the other thing that I also wanted to bring about was the fact that Timothy was open with his feelings. He was open with his feelings. He didn't try to pose. He didn't try to make it seem like he wasn't scared or he wasn't this or that. He didn't try to like pose for. He didn't try to make himself feel like. He didn't try to make himself look um any stronger to Paul. Man, obviously, and you can even think about it. For me, I also think about like when you are around certain people you want to like respect. There's a certain part of me, I was just thinking about myself that you'd want to maybe appear strong or appear like nothing is bothering you or that everything is like rosy and stuff. But Timothy didn't do that. He was very open and honest with Paul about his feelings. To move also like to look at, is it Second Corinthians? No, Second Timothy verses what 2? For Second Corinthians 2 verse 4. I'm gonna hope it's 2 verse 4. Hopefully it's 2 verse 4. But when it basically speaks about that, for God to not give you the spirit of fear, timidity, but a gift of love, power, and self-control. And those verses highlight the fact that Paul and Timothy, or I should say Timothy, had such an openness and transparency about his feelings with Paul that he made sure that he never even tried to lie. He never tried to lie about how he was feeling about anything like that. And that was very interesting for me because I have come to, and just like looking at the world and like everything in general, is that there's such a push, there's such a, if you're not careful, you can fall into the world's depiction of a man, which is like this person who doesn't feel, who isn't fearful, who is not timid, who is not like this or that. Even though we are called to make sure that we understand that we're not that's not the spirit we're given with, but we can be honest about where we are in that moment. We can be honest that we are in a state of fear in this moment. We are in a state of timidity, and even though we're not going to stay here, we can still be open and honest about it. And I think that was something which I was very empowered by, to like just to be able to just like look at Timothy and see that from him. It was very very cool to see, especially as like a young person. It's like that vulnerability being shown between him and Paul was very very nice to see. And in the obviously also in the context of like the world and like the toxic masculinity and the red pill community and just like those different things, it's very very like refreshing to like see this Timothy being that dis- depiction, not depiction because it's real, that embodiment. Ooh, damn, okay, that embodiment of being a man who is able to feel and still get the job done, basically. Yeah. What's next? Practice, 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 practice. The last point I wanted to make was about practice. How did Timothy put all of this, him being a man of faith, him being a man of feelings, him being a man of God, how did he put this into practice? And here I don't really have notes. I just have two verses that I want to share. And I want those to speak for themselves because they are like really, really powerful. And they are First Timothy. This is based on practice. What does it mean to be a young man or woman of God? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean in practice, in you living your life with your church community, with the world, in the world, at work, at home, at everywhere. What does that look like in practice as a young man? And so we are going to the verse is in First Timothy 5 verses what? First Timothy 5 verses, where is Timothy now? There we go. First Timothy 5 verses 1 to 2. And this is the ESV version. Again, thank you so much to Heritage Baptist Church for these amazing Bibles. So, First Timothy 5 verse 1 to 5. Verse 1 to 2. It says, and this is what being a young man or woman of God is being put into practice. It means, do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, in all purity. And that's what it means to put into practice. First Timothy 1 verses 5, no, First Timothy 1, 5, 1 to verse 1 to 2. Chapter 5 verse 1 to 2. It's do not rebuke older men, but encourage him, as young as you would your father. Younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters, in all purity. And that's what it means, just like making sure that every action, every thought, everything that you do is done in a state of purity. And in the previous chapter, it speaks about how Paul charged Timothy to act in, first of all, in good heart, secondly, of good conscience, and third was what? Good conscience and what is the third one? Good conscience and sincere faith. So making sure that you combine all of those three in all of your actions, and then you'll be literally an upstanding Christian, young Christian man or woman. And then the second one is 1 Timothy 6, 11 to 14. That is what it means to put being a young Christian man or woman into practice. And it says, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 11 to 14. But as for you, O man of God, flee these things. Pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, gentleness. Fight the good fight of the faith. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called, and about which you were made, the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. I charge you in the presence of God, who gives lives, and then it just continues. But that is like, for me, just the fact that pursuing righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, gentleness, those are things which we are called to pursue as young Christians. That is what will separate us from the world. That is what will separate us from the customs and the behaviors of the world, and will transform our minds and lead us to God's will, presence, amazing. Yeah. And fight the good fight. And it's going to allow that, because it's going to be a fight. To be a young man and woman of God is going to be a fight. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be so many things that you have to tackle, and some things are unique to you. So other things are probably going to be like things which you have which many people deal with. But you are called to fight the good fight of faith. It says faith, right? Fight the good fight of the faith, right? And that is like literally. And then the second part, take hold of the eternal life to which you were called, and which you made the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. Take hold of the eternal life to which you are called. And I love that it requires a lot of proactiveness. You have to take hold. You have to take hold of the eternal life to which you have been called. You have been called. You have been called. Literally, the person, doesn't matter who you are, you have been called. There's a purpose which God has put in your life in this moment, for eternity, before you were even born, for His will and for His kingdom. And we have that. We are tasked with, as Timothy was, with not pursuing, but taking hold of that. And that means that we have we have a responsibility to be proactive in that. And I think that is very, very cool because there's so many action terms used here. First one was pursue. So you have to pursue. Second one was take hold. And then the third one was fight. Fight the good fight. So those three things. Pursue, fight, and take hold. So that's at the core of what it means to be a young Christian. Those three things. And yeah, yeah, that is Youngbloods Timothy, the first part, the first video. Thank you so much. If you Yeah, thank you so much. I pray that this video blesses you, and I really appreciate this space. If you have like gotten to this part, I appreciate you listening to this far, and I pray that this has just like impacted you in a positive way and just like encouraged you, taught you something. And yeah, we're also learning together. I'm also learning too. One thing that I do want to like leave is I want to also like to I pray that this also strengthens your path. I pray that this strengthens your path. That as you are continuing, that's literally why this channel is called the path, because we are all on a path to the kingdom of heaven, and it's going to require a lot of things from us. And so I just pray like the word of God like encourages that we'll share today will encourage like each of us in that. And yeah, man, let's keep on keeping on. And let's keep on building, let's keep on moving, man. Yeah, that is it from me. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love each and every one of you. And yeah, what else? Am I missing anything? Um, I hope you have an amazing day. It is whenever you watch this. Amazing day, afternoon, morning. Good morning if you watch this morning. Good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you watch this, good day, good midday. Okay. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys in the next video, which is like I'm literally shooting right after this. I'm shooting another video. So crazy. I'll see you guys right now. So goodbye.